Welcome back to my channel. To all my amazing viewers, thank you from the bottom of my heart for every like, comment, share, and moment you've spent with my stories. Your support turns ideas into magic and keeps me inspired to create more love, laughter, and joy in every word. You are the real reason this journey is so beautiful. Stay tuned, stay kind, and always believe in stories that make your heart smile. The sound of rain drummed lightly against the windows of Whitmore Innovations, but inside the sleek, minimalist office of CEO Donald Whitmore, everything was calm. Except him. He stared down at the open laptop screen, not really reading the spreadsheet in front of him. His mind had wandered again. It always did around this time of year. 5 years to the week since Sandra disappeared. With a quiet sigh, he closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair, his fingers tented against his lips. Most people assumed Donald had moved on. He was successful, composed, and brilliant. The media called him the ICE CEO, a man immune to distractions, including emotions. But there was one thing he'd never been able to compartmentalize. Sandra Bennett. She was the only woman he'd ever loved, and she'd vanished days before their wedding. No goodbye, no note. Just a message from her assistant saying she had urgent family matters and would be unreachable for an indefinite time. He'd waited, he'd searched, he'd begged mutual friends for answers. But Sandra had gone up in smoke, like she never existed at all. "Don," a voice interrupted from the doorway. "You're doing that brooding thing again." Lucas Whitmore leaned against the doorframe with a boyish grin, his wind-tousled brown hair damp from the rain. At 29, Lucas was Donald's opposite in every way, easygoing, charming, and effortlessly social. Donald arched an eyebrow. "I don't brood. You do. You also sit in the dark like a vampire." Lucas sauntered in and dropped into the chair across from him. "Anyway, I came to collect on a favor." Donald blinked. "What kind of favor?" "I want you to set me up on a blind date." Donald laughed, a rare, short sound. "Are you serious?" "Very." Lucas crossed his arms. "You've got access to that fancy, ultra-exclusive matchmaking service your company sponsors, Evoke. Let me be your test subject." Donald raised an eyebrow. "I don't think they cater to impulsive little brothers looking for a thrill." "Come on, I'm serious. I'm tired of swiping. You always say love should be intentional, right? So be intentional for me." Donald considered. Lucas had been single for a while. Too many shallow flings and not enough substance. And maybe, just maybe, this could get his own mind off the past. "Fine," Donald said at last. "I'll reach out to Evoke. They're hosting a few discreet pairings this weekend. I'll arrange one for you." Lucas beamed. "You're the best, Ice King. Don't call me that." Too late. By Friday, everything was arranged. The date would take place at Verona, an elegant Italian restaurant with low lighting and a private back room reserved for members of Evoke. Donald had even arranged to meet the woman beforehand, just briefly, to ensure everything was in order. Old habits of control and caution hadn't died. He arrived 10 minutes early and took a seat at the edge of the bar, dressed in a charcoal suit, his posture perfect as always. A hostess offered him a drink, which he declined. Instead, he watched the door. He had no reason to feel tense. He wasn't the one going on the date. He was just making sure. At precisely 7:02 p.m., the door opened, and his heart stopped. Sandra Bennett walked in. She looked the same and yet completely different. Her dark hair was longer now, curled softly over her shoulders. She wore a form-fitting navy dress that complemented her olive skin, her eyes searching the room nervously. She looked more mature, more guarded, but unmistakably her. Donald stood up, frozen in place. His voice came out hoarse. "Sandra." Her eyes snapped to his. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she took a step forward, her lips parted in disbelief. "Hello, Donald." Time slowed. The sound of the restaurant faded. Donald stepped closer, eyes locked on hers. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. "You..." He swallowed hard. You're Lucas's blind date. Her expression crumpled slightly like a dam breaking behind her calm exterior. I didn't know. I had no idea he was your brother. I didn't even know you two were related. Donald's jaw clenched. Emotions warred within him. Shock, confusion, anger, longing. Why now? After all these years, you show up like this. Sandra's breath caught. I didn't plan this, I swear. I applied to Evoke 2 months ago after a friend pushed me into it. This match came up 2 days ago. I almost canceled tonight. Something told me not to come. And yet, here you are, he said bitterly. 5 years later. Sandra looked away. I can't explain everything here, not like this. Please, can we talk? Donald hesitated. Every muscle in his body screamed to walk out, to shut down the past and the pain she caused. But another part of him, the part that had never stopped aching, urged him to stay. I'm not doing this in a restaurant, he said. Come with me. They left through a side entrance, away from the crowd. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the night air smelled like wet pavement and possibility. Donald led her to his car, his mind spinning. They said nothing during the drive, but the silence was electric, heavy with all the words they never got to say. He pulled into the underground garage of his building and guided her up to the penthouse, a minimalist, glass-walled space filled with cold elegance and lonely perfection. Once inside, he finally turned to face her. Start talking. Sandra stood in the middle of the room, arms crossed tightly. You deserve to be angry. I left. I didn't explain. I broke your heart, Donald, and I hate myself for that every day. Why did you do it? He asked, his voice low. Why vanish like that? She looked at him, truly looked, and for the first time in years he saw something behind her eyes that resembled the woman he used to know. Because I had no choice, she whispered, and because I thought disappearing would protect you. He stared. From what? Sandra's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. It's a long story, and it's not just mine, but I'm ready to tell you, if you still want to hear it. He was silent for a long moment. Then he exhaled and said, Tomorrow, noon, my office. No more running. She nodded slowly. I'll be there. As she turned to leave, Donald watched her go, his heart pounding with the ghosts of 5 years, and a spark he thought had died long ago. The next day, the office felt colder than usual, though the air conditioning was functioning fine. Donald Whitmore stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of his corner suite, overlooking the city skyline, his arms crossed and his jaw locked in silent tension. He hadn't slept. Not really. Every time he closed his eyes, images of Sandra flickered behind his lids, her soft voice saying hello, Donald, her eyes wide with pain, her presence bringing back everything he'd tried to bury. And now she was going to explain why she left. He wasn't sure he was ready, but he had to know. At exactly 12 p.m., a soft knock came. He turned. Come in. The door opened slowly, and Sandra stepped in, her silhouette framed by the bright light of the hallway. Today she wore a soft beige blouse and dark jeans, her hair tied loosely at the nape of her neck. Simple, elegant, still utterly disarming. Thanks for seeing me, she said, her voice cautious. Donald gestured to the chair across from his desk. Sit. She did. He sat across from her, and for a moment, the hum of the city below was the only sound between them. Start at the beginning, he said, his tone clipped. No lies, no vague answers. Sandra nodded. You remember my father? Everett Bennett? Donald stiffened. The investment banker. Hard to forget. He never liked me. She smiled faintly. He didn't like anyone. But that wasn't the real problem. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap. About a month before our wedding, he came to me. He was panicked. He'd gotten involved in something illegal. Insider trading, offshore laundering. I still don't know all the details, but someone found out. A former business rival. They blackmailed him and threatened to go public. Donald leaned forward. So he was being blackmailed. Why leave? Sandra's voice trembled. Because they threatened to use you. Donald froze. They told him they'd leak fake reports to the SEC tying you to the scheme. Your name, your company. You would have been investigated, dragged through the mud. Maybe worse. They had photoshopped documents, fake wire transfers. I saw some of them. It looked real. Donald clenched his fists. You should have told me. We could have fought it. I wanted to, she whispered, eyes shimmering. But my father begged me not to. He swore it would destroy both of you. He said the only way to make it all disappear was for me to leave quietly and cut all ties. Donald stood and paced toward the window. So you chose to vanish. I thought I was protecting you, Sandra said, standing now too. I thought if I left, they'd back off. And they did. The day after I disappeared, the threats stopped. Everything went silent. Donald turned to face her, his expression unreadable. You broke me. Her voice broke. I know. I waited for months. I tried to find you. I thought you were dead. Or worse. Then I saw your photo in a charity gala feature a year later, smiling like nothing had happened. Tears streamed down her cheeks. That night was the first time I went out in public again. I wasn't smiling inside. I've never been the same, Donald. I never stopped loving you. I thought about calling you 1,000 times. I didn't think you'd ever want to see me again. Donald stared at her. This woman who had once been his entire future. The rage, the sorrow, the longing. They were all still there, tangled like knots in his chest. He stepped closer. Why evoke? Why now? Sandra wiped her cheeks. I thought maybe it was time to try living again. A friend convinced me to sign up. I didn't know Lucas was your brother. I never even knew your family's last name wasn't on your personal records. When I saw you last night, I felt like the air had been knocked out of me. Donald exhaled, his voice softer now. Lucas still doesn't know who you are. I know, she said, and I don't want to come between you two. He doesn't even like blind dates. It was a joke he dared me into arranging. Donald shook his head. It was never supposed to be real. And yet, here we are. They stood in silence, a fragile thread of shared pain and memory stretching between them. Finally, Donald spoke again. I don't know if I can just forget everything, but I can't pretend you never existed either. Sandra nodded. I don't want forgiveness. I just want you to know the truth. I believe you, he said quietly. She looked up, startled. You do? I always knew something didn't add up. But believing you doesn't mean I'm not angry. I understand, she said. I deserve your anger. Donald walked toward the small sitting area beside the window. I need to think, but I want you to stay in the city. Sandra hesitated. For how long? I don't know, but I need more time with you. To see who you are now. To decide if what we had is still possible. She stepped closer, heart racing. Are you saying there's still a chance? Donald met her gaze. I'm saying the door isn't closed. A long silence passed. Sandra's eyes welled again, but this time from something softer. Hope. Thank you, she whispered. That's more than I ever expected. Later that evening, back in his apartment, Donald poured himself a glass of whiskey and sank onto the leather sofa. He should have felt clearer, lighter, but his mind was still a storm. He picked up the old photo frame on his bookshelf, a picture of him and Sandra at the lake house, arms wrapped around each other, grinning like the world couldn't touch them. Then his phone buzzed. Lucas. Hey, bro. Weird question. You ever date a woman named Sandra Bennett? Donald's chest tightened. He stared at the message, fingers hovering over the keys. Before he could answer, Lucas sent another text. She seems familiar. I saw an old article on the news site about your past engagement. Was that her? Donald took a deep breath. Yes, it's her. We're talking. Lucas's reply came fast. Damn. Didn't see that one coming. You okay? Working on it. Lucas's next message hit differently. Just don't forget what I said last week. Sometimes love shows up when you least expect it. Maybe this one's for you, not me. Donald stared at the screen for a long moment. Then he replied, maybe. He looked back at the photo, then out the window at the city lights. His thoughts now shifting not to the pain Sandra caused, but to the possibility she still held. Maybe fate wasn't cruel. Maybe it was just late. Saturday morning arrived cloaked in sunshine, as if the city itself had decided to give Donald Whitmore a break from the storm of his emotions. He stood at the edge of the lake in Central Park, hands in the pockets of his navy coat, watching boats drift by. The park had always been Sandra's favorite place in the city. It was her idea to come here today, and strangely, he hadn't hesitated to agree. At exactly 10 a.m., he heard the familiar click of heels on the pavement behind him. He didn't turn. He didn't need to. Still punctual, he said softly. Still early, Sandra replied, walking up beside him. You used to beat the sun out of bed. Donald gave her a sideways glance. I still do. She smiled. It was small, uncertain, but real. They began walking along the path together in silence. Trees whispered in the breeze. Children laughed in the distance. For a moment it almost felt like they were back in the time before everything broke. I couldn't sleep last night, Sandra said quietly. Me neither. I kept replaying what I said, wondering if I explained enough. Or too much. You were honest, Donald said. That's more than I got 5 years ago. Sandra flinched, then nodded. I still hate how I left. He glanced at her. I hated you for a long time. She met his eyes. Do you still? No. But I don't know what I feel right now. They walked further, eventually reaching the small bridge where he'd first told her he loved her years ago. The memory hit them both like a wave, and she leaned over the railing, eyes distant. You never replaced me, she said. Donald looked at her. No, I wondered, so many times, if you found someone, if she was better, happier, more open, someone who didn't run. He shook his head slowly. There were women. None stayed. They weren't you. Sandra's breath caught. I wanted to be someone you could build forever with, but I made a choice for you without asking. Donald's voice was low. I spent 5 years building walls so I wouldn't feel what I'm feeling now. What are you feeling? She asked. He was silent for a moment. Then, angry, grateful, terrified, hopeful. And I still love you. That's the worst part. Tears welled in her eyes. That's the best part, she whispered. He stepped closer. Why now, Sandra? Why come back into my life when I was just starting to believe I could live without you? Because I'm tired of being afraid, she said. I lost 5 years, Donald. Not because of the scandal or the threats or my father. I lost them because I thought I didn't deserve a second chance. Donald studied her, his heart thudding. And now I want to fight for what we had, for what we could still have. He reached for her hand, hesitant at first, then fully intertwining his fingers with hers. Lucas knows, he said. Her head snapped up. What? I didn't tell him. He figured it out on his own. He messaged me last night. Her eyes widened. What did he say? Donald gave a small smile. He said, Don't forget what I told you. Sometimes love shows up when you least expect it. Maybe this one's for you, not me. Sandra laughed, tears sliding down her cheeks. God, I love your brother. So do I, Donald said, though I might start screening his blind dates more carefully. She smiled through her tears. Do you think we could really start again? Donald looked at her, his face softening in a way it hadn't in years. Let's not start again. Let's start from here. That evening they met again at Verona, the same restaurant where their worlds collided days earlier. But this time it wasn't a coincidence. It was a choice. The manager, recognizing Donald, seated them in a private corner booth near the window. They really talked for hours about the years apart, the people they became, the dreams they'd buried. Sandra told him how she'd worked in nonprofit development, building programs for underprivileged youth while keeping a low profile. Donald confessed how nothing ever felt like home after she left, not even his penthouse. "You're not the only one who built walls," she said, her hand brushing his across the table. He turned his palm upward, curling his fingers around hers. "Let's tear them down." Just then, the waiter brought dessert, tiramisu, their favorite. A spark passed between them as they shared it, like muscle memory, rediscovering joy. Donald reached into his coat pocket and pulled something out, a simple, slightly worn velvet box. Sandra's breath hitched. He opened it slowly. Inside was the engagement ring he'd never returned, never sold, never buried. "I kept it," he said. Didn't know why, just couldn't let it go. Sandra covered her mouth, her heart pounding. "I'm not proposing." "Not yet," he added quickly, "but I want you to take it. Not as a promise, as a possibility." Tears slid down her cheeks again. "I don't deserve you." Donald smiled softly. "I'm not perfect either, Sandra. We're both broken in places. But maybe we fit together there." She nodded and took the box gently. "Then let's make this possibility real. Day by day." He stood, offered his hand, and pulled her into a quiet, warm embrace. The kind of embrace that stitched time back together. As they stepped outside, the city shimmered under the moonlight. The air was crisp, but neither of them noticed. They walked slowly, hand in hand. The world soft and alive again. For the first time in years, Donald felt whole. 6 months later, the Whitmore Foundation Gala was in full swing. Cameras flashed, champagne flowed, and guests mingled beneath sparkling chandeliers in the ballroom of the Whitmore Grand Hotel. Donald stood at the podium, giving his closing speech, confident and composed. But this time, his voice carried more warmth than ever. "I've learned recently," he said, glancing toward the front row, "that some of life's greatest returns come when we least expect them. And sometimes, the past doesn't return to haunt you. It returns to heal you." He raised his glass, to second chances. The crowd applauded. From her seat, Sandra smiled through tears, her left hand now bearing the ring she once left behind, now shining brighter than ever. And beside her, Lucas Whitmore winked and raised his own glass, mouthing, "Told you so." 1 year later, spring had returned to New York City, dressing Central Park in fresh blossoms and golden sunlight. On a quiet Sunday morning, the same path that had once held the weight of uncertain goodbyes now shimmered with promise. Donald Whitmore stood beneath the arch of a small stone bridge, wearing a light gray suit, no tie, his dark hair tousled just enough to suggest he hadn't tried too hard, though everyone knew he had. Across the green, Sandra Bennett approached. She wore a simple, elegant ivory dress that moved like petals in the wind. Her hair was swept back in soft curls, a few wild strands escaping, just the way Donald liked. In her hands she held a small bouquet of white tulips, her mother's favorite flower. They met under the archway, where a quiet group of family and friends waited, including Lucas, who stood proudly beside Donald as his best man. The ceremony was intimate. No media, no spotlight. Just whispered vows, heartfelt promises, and a kiss that felt like a long-awaited exhale. Afterward, as guests laughed and mingled over mimosas and soft jazz in the garden, Donald pulled Sandra aside beneath a cherry blossom tree. "I can't believe we're here," she whispered, her fingers trailing over his lapel, "after everything." "We were never really finished," he said. "Just paused." Sandra smiled. "You still brood sometimes, you know." Donald smirked. "You still walk into rooms like you own the air? And you still love me?" "More than ever," he said. She leaned into him. "I want to build a life with you, Donald. One without shadows. one with laughter. Then let's start right now, he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. No more fear, no more what-ifs, just us. In the distance, Lucas raised a toast to the couple that made it through heartbreak, scandal, bad timing, and a really awkward blind date. Everyone laughed. Sandra and Donald turned toward the sound, hands clasped tight, faces full of light. And as the wind carried petals through the air, it was clear. This wasn't the start of a new chapter. It was the beginning of the story they were always meant to finish. Together. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. Bye. See you in our next video.